Welcome to episode 82 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. Today's episode is showcasing the best content from the Brainy Business in 2019. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. I don't know about you, but I'm having a hard time believing it's 2020 already. 2019 was such an amazing year with so many milestones here at the Brainy Business, which you heard me talk about on the celebrations episode, and that closed out the year here on the podcast. It's number 80, and I've linked to it in the show notes, which you can find in the app you're listening to or at thebrainybusiness.com/82. There is a bunch of great stuff linked in the show notes there for you today. So if you haven't checked out the show notes before, this is a really great opportunity to start. This episode is going to be digging into the top content from 2019. So there are a ton of past episodes and articles you'll want to check out if you haven't seen or heard them all already. There's also a link in there to the blog post that I wrote with the full top 10 lists, so you can easily use direct links and things like that. If you're already on the Brainy Business list, you have gotten all those links from me in the email that you receive every week, along with links to the super secret subscribers page with all the freebies. There are over 40 worksheets there for you now, as well as links to my free ebook and the free Master Your Mindset mini course, all sorts of great stuff. Definitely more to come in 2020. So if you haven't joined the list yet, please do. This is a great time. If you're in the States, you can join by texting the word Brainy, BRAINY, to 33777. And wherever you are in the world, you can automatically get added to the list when you sign up for any freebie at thebrainybusiness.com. The one in this episode's show notes is for the Master Your Mindset mini course, which will help you narrow down your goals and kick off 2020 with a bang. And yes, there is still time to join the January Mindset course. So if you want to ensure you have the best year ever, let's do that together. I'll talk about that more before closing out the episode. And before I dig into the top content, I want to take a moment to thank all of you for listening, subscribing, sharing, connecting on social media, reaching out to let me know your wins and the behavioral economics concepts you've applied in your own businesses. Those are some of my favorite messages to get. I truly love hearing from you, so please continue to reach out. In 2019, I heard from listeners either by email or on social media from all over the world: Poland, Romania, Spain, South Africa, India, Italy, Ireland, and so many more countries. Wherever you are, if you love the podcast and behavioral economics, please do reach out through your favorite social app to let me know where you are. I love connecting with each of you, and it really is me responding. I read all my emails and all those social posts and love to connect with each of you. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as The Brainy Biz, B-I-Z. There are links in the show notes to make it super easy for you. And since this is a top content episode, I figure we should do the top countries downloading the Brainy Business. Of course, the United States is first, and that's no surprise, and I'll break down states here in a minute. But that's followed by the UK, Canada, and Australia, which have remained the top 4 since the last summary I did on the anniversary episode in July. Since then, India has pushed past Germany to claim the number 5 spot. Brazil is still number 7, and Mexico retained its number 8 spot. But we have a new addition to the list. The Netherlands has made its way into the top 10, claiming the number 9 spot, and South Africa rounds out the list. And I do want to give an honorable mention to Ireland, which came in at number 11. There has been a lot of connection and sharing on social media via Ireland, which I attribute, at least in part, to my being a guest on Louise Brogan's podcast called The Social Bee, which came out in early September. Thanks, Louise. And now, because the bulk of those downloads are here in the US, let's go ahead through those top 10 states as well. There was a little shifting in placement, but the same 10 states held on to their top spots since mid-year. Coming in at number 10 is North Carolina, followed by Colorado, then Georgia, Virginia, and Florida at number 6. The state with the 5th most downloads is Illinois. Number 4 is New York. Then Texas at number 3, which I know my friends at Texas A&M will probably demand a recount again, as they did after the July numbers came out. The doctoral students at the Human Behavior Lab are assigned to listen to the Brainy Business to help with the behavioral economics concepts. So there are a lot of listeners there in College Station. You're getting close though, guys, only a couple hundred downloads away from catching the number 2 state, which is my home state here of Washington. And continuing to top the list in a big way is California. A shout out to Hernan and James, my friends, the business bros in San Diego, who I think have at least a little something to do with that. There's a link to the episode where I was a guest on the Business Bros in the show notes. And I know they share tidbits from the Brainy Business content all the time on their show. So thanks, bros. And thanks again to everyone who is listening, wherever you are. I would love to connect and learn more about you. So please do share where you're listening from and where we hang out on social media, where you can find me again as The Brainy Biz. All right, now let's talk top content. As I said, there is a blog post linked in the show notes that has links to all of these episodes and articles in order. In case you're wondering how these got to be the top 10, where that all came from, it was found by doing a sort of all the downloads of the podcast. It's based on what you all have listened to and subscribed and shared to find the most popular content from the podcast. In 2019, there were over 106,000 downloads of the podcast. We are growing in number every day and month, and it's been a lot of fun to watch. To give you some context, the show launched in July of 2018, and that year ended with just under 17,000 downloads. And then there were 106,000 plus in the following 12 months. So those are some exciting growth numbers. Of those 106,000-ish downloads and 80 episodes of content to choose from, we get our top 10, starting with one of my all-time favorite concepts, time discounting, which was episode 51 of the podcast. I also call this the I'll Start Monday effect, because it's the concept behind all our new diets, exercise plans, failed resolutions, as well as efforts to save more money, quit smoking, and generally change behavior. We humans don't see the future in the same way we see today. And when we commit ourselves to start running or exercising or eating better on Monday, we're committing a future self, which our brain actually sees as a different person. When you wake up to the alarm going off on Monday morning, it's much more difficult to actually get out of bed than you thought it would be when you set that alarm, because now it's a task for you instead of future you. I've included a link to a research study I did, which came out last year, about helping people to save more by combating time discounting and making the future self more relevant. And I just love this episode and concept. Changing behavior, which I also talked about last week on episode 81, doesn't have to be as hard as we make it out to be. And understanding time discounting is a big way to help combat that. When you're working to change behavior, look at what you can do right now, this moment, your next decision, instead of pushing to tomorrow or Monday. It can make all the difference. 2 of the top 10 were analyses of businesses, including Apple Card, which came in at number 9 on the top downloads list, and Starbucks, which was number 5. In these episodes, I use real-world examples and talk about what top companies do in business that outline various concepts from behavioral economics and how you could use the same concepts in your own business. Starbucks talks about the proper use of scarcity in a way that's beneficial and not threatening. Apple Card definitely digs into the benefits of proper message framing, another of my absolute favorite topics. I talk about and recommend the episode on framing all the time. It was episode number 16, and I've linked to both it and the episode on scarcity in the show notes, as those two didn't make the top 10 in downloads, but they are really foundational ones that you should be aware of and that I recommend listening to. Number 8 on the top downloads list was episode 59 on the pain of paying, why the first item in a purchase is the hardest. This episode was part of a little series that talked about partitioning as well and how adding little barriers can impact behavior. This is why you eat less chips from a bunch of bags than one giant one. When you have a tiny barrier of grabbing and opening a new bag, it makes you stop and think about your behavior versus just mindlessly eating. The pain of paying is very similar, as it's a form of partitioning on buying behavior. Getting someone to buy one thing is the hardest part, but once they have bought something, it's easier to add on more items. This is why loss leaders are effective, and why you may also like style suggestions work. This is a form of herding, both in following others with comments like, people like you also enjoyed things like this, or self-herding, which is when your brain says, I'm the type of person who buys things from the Brainy business. And then when the Brainy business comes out with more items, it's easier to buy because you've done it before. Getting that first purchase action is so critical for business. And this episode helps you to understand the science behind what's happening in your customer's brain. I've also linked to the episode on herding in the show notes, as it wasn't in the top 10, but is another of those ones I talk about and reference a lot. And like I said, it really ties back on that pain of paying piece. And while we're talking about paying for things, I want to give a little shout out for The Truth About Pricing, episode 5, which was a top downloaded episode of all time, but didn't quite make the top 10 in 2019. This is another one I talk about constantly, and we'll be giving a lot of presentations around this concept in 2020. It's so important and something I work with clients on a lot. So it is, of course, linked in the show notes for you. It's the 4th most downloaded episode of all time, even though it didn't make the top downloads for 2019. Presumably, it's because it came out so early on, but it's a really great episode and one I still refer back to all the time. If you haven't listened to it yet, you should. And if you're interested in learning more about pricing, I do have a course available on incorporating behavioral economics into your pricing strategy, which you can take at any time. Details are at thebrainybusiness.com/courses. Next is game theory. This was a really fun episode. It was number 62 and so important for understanding negotiations and communicating with anybody. The big tip I will give from this episode is to understand the difference between playing to win and playing not to lose. They are not the same thing and result in vastly different outcomes. People who play not to lose, which is most of the population, often achieve what they're trying to avoid, i.e., they have a worse outcome than those who play to win. When you focus on not losing, you often miss the real opportunities to grow and achieve that biggest possible thing. Playing to win often means putting yourself in uncomfortable situations that don't come naturally. But that's how you stand out and achieve goals in life and business. Again, this was the focus of episode 62 on game theory, the 7th most downloaded episode in 2019. Next, we have episode 45, which was an overview of personal biases, part of the 8-part series on all the biases. And episode 50 on selective attention biases made the top 10 as well. It was actually the 3rd most downloaded episode of the year. Those are pretty much, actually, they're kind of like this episode that we're doing now, where they kind of run through a series of topics in pretty quick succession. So on personal biases, that's talking about how our brains think about ourselves and the way that we look at our own behavior versus if someone else was to do exactly the same thing, how we look at that differently. Selective attention biases is about how you focus your attention and what matters in the moment and how that impacts anything else. So again, that's episode 45 and 50, which were both part of an 8-part series on the biases, and they both made the top 10. Only 3 to go now. Next is episode 61 on color theory. And I must say, I am not surprised at all that this one made top 3 on the list, as it was a topic a lot of listeners asked for and something that comes up so much in branding and marketing discussions. Colors absolutely do matter, but it might not be in the way you think. As I dig into on that episode, it isn't about one exact color. Say that blue buttons or red buttons always work, which is not the case. But understanding contrast is really important in getting people to take action. So a big red button would stand out more on Facebook than a big blue button, but a big blue button might stand out more on Target's website than a big red one. So understanding your own colors and using contrast in a smart way can encourage actions and clicks. There are also tons of tips about the psychology of the various colors and how to pick the best ones for your brand and business in episode 61 on color theory, which again was the 3rd most downloaded episode of 2019. And now, continuing to hold strong are the top episodes of all time. Number 2 is Episode 2, the top 5 wording mistakes businesses make. This also has a related presentation, which I gave several times in 2019, so I'm not surprised it tops the list. This is also a concise list with concrete tips on ways you can implement behavioral economics into your messaging. The categories to avoid are being too literal, too vague, too much, too confusing, and too boring. This is the first episode where I talked about cotton candy grapes, something people tag me in posts about all the time, which is awesome. And also the Snickers study on anchoring and adjustment, another of my favorite episodes, number 11, which I've linked to in the show notes. Anchoring is a super important concept in pricing strategy and sharing information of any kind. So again, the 2nd most downloaded episode is the top 5 wording mistakes businesses make, episode number 2, linked for you here in the show notes. And before I get to the most downloaded episode in 2019 and of all time, a little shout out to episode 3. Do lead magnets work? And do you need one? Which was the 6th most downloaded episode ever, but didn't make the 2019 top 10 list. In short, yes, lead magnets work, and you definitely need one. Episode 3 helps you come up with yours and understand why they matter for businesses. Some examples of lead magnets, if you're not familiar with that term, would be my free ebook and the free Master Your Mindset mini course. These are called lead magnets because they encourage people to sign up for the list. So you're going to come in and be part of the community and allow me to provide you with more content via email by giving out a freebie. In this case, like I said, the ebook, a free course, and to experience what it's like to work with me. In many ways, the podcast itself is a lead magnet. So things that encourage people to engage with you and be willing to be part of that process are lead magnets. And again, talk about that more on episode 3, which is available for you to listen to at any time. And finally, the most downloaded episode of 2019 and the podcast in general is the very first one, Unlocking the Secrets of the Brain. This makes a lot of sense, as many people who are just starting to test out a new podcast will start with the first episode. And then some people choose to carry on straight through. I know a lot of you do that. You listen in release order, you've let me know. But some others listen to the first episode, realize they like it, and then pick and choose through episodes they think sound the most interesting and relevant, especially when you come into a podcast and like now we're over 80 episodes in, there's a ton to look through. And so if you want to jump around, you're more likely to do that, but most people will listen to that first episode first and then move all over the place. So in this first episode of the podcast, I talk about behavioral economics in general, a little about my background, why I started the podcast, and how the brain works. It's a great foundation at any point and a good one to check back into if you haven't listened to yet. So much great content in the back catalog that didn't make the top 10 list. Choice architecture and nudging, the analysis of Costco, how to set brainy goals and to stay motivated. So much great stuff. And you can see the full list of episodes at any time at thebrainybusiness.com/podcast. It's updated as each new episode comes out and is a great reference to scroll through and see all the existing episodes to choose from. Something to look forward to in 2020 are compilations and groupings, I guess. I've had requests from listeners to go back and easily find, say, all the Behavioral Economics Foundations episodes, or all the episodes that are related to pricing in an easy reference guide of sorts, or like a page you could go to and see everything that is about pricing or all those foundational episodes. Now that the content is adding up, this will be coming to help you pick a topic you want to learn about and get all the insights related to that topic. Expect that mindset and pricing will be first, since they have courses created already, which go far beyond this free content on the podcast and articles, but they have the most content and focus and already have dedicated pages on the website. So those are going to be coming soon, along with those foundations as a grouping. And if there's anything else you think is a great grouping that you have looked for easy reference to get to in the past on the website, or would like me to add into the queue, please email me and let me know, or find me on social media. The email is melina@thebrainybusiness.com, and you can find me on the socials as The Brainy Biz. This content is for you, after all, and I want to continually work to make it easy for you to find and use and implement. And as I mentioned the courses there, I want to remind you that there's a link to the courses page of the website, just thebrainybusiness.com/courses, with details and an opportunity for you to sign up for the pricing course, which is evergreen and at your own pace, and the mindset course. The January wave starts very soon, and there's still space for you if you're ready to join us and tackle mindset. There are also 2 more waves of the mindset course starting in April and September if you want a little more time to get ready to start. Again, details at thebrainybusiness.com/courses, and I look forward to seeing you in a course this year. Now, as we continue with the top content of 2020, I'm going to talk about the Inc. column, of course, but I also want to give a little shout out to the content I've created for CU Insight for all the credit union folks listening. I've written quite a bit there over the years, and they put out a list of the top 10 articles from 2019, and one of mine made the list. It was one word that increased sales by 38%. And gets back to that same Snickers study I talked about a few minutes ago. They have so much content come out every year from CU Insight. It is a real honor to have a post in the top 10. So thank you to them for featuring my articles and for having me a guest on the CU Insight Experience podcast last year. I've linked to that article and episode in the show notes here for you. Now, on to the Inc. column's top content. I wrote 27 articles for Inc. last year and expect to create a bunch more in 2020. So here is the top list, which is actually a top 11 because I put the list out just a few days before the end of the year. And then one dark horse, super late post jumped its way from not even being on the list to hitting number 7. So I wanted to make sure everything stayed on the list and what had been number 10 didn't fall off the face of the earth. So I've updated the blog post to include them both. Number 11 on the most read articles on Inc. is about counterfactual and prefactual thinking, which both have episodes on the podcast, and is called How to Break the Negative Cycle of What If Thinking. We all what if, and that can cause you to get stuck mentally if you aren't careful. In this article, I share a simple tip of incorporating the language of next time I'll into your life, which can help you push past all the bad and regretful thinking and help you change your life for the better. The importance of word choice also came up in the number 10 article, Why Rami Malek's Choice of Self-Talk May Have Led to His Academy Award. This one details the importance of speaking to yourself in second person instead of first person. So instead of having your self-talk say, I got this, when you shift to you got this, it's proven to have a bigger impact on behavior. It's theorized that this is because it relates to how a coach, a mentor, or a parent might motivate you, which helps to feel more important to the brain. The next article is 3 Ways You Can Limit Everyday Distractions, which is based on insights from Nir Eyal's book, Indistractable. I interviewed Nir on episode 78 of the podcast, and he is just a wealth of amazing information. As you're looking to make behavioral change this year, being indistractable and using some of those tips from Nir should be on your list. Check out that article to see how I used his tips in my own life and business. Moving on to our next topic here. Have you ever gotten that connection request on social media where it just feels like spam? Does it make you wonder how people feel about your cold invites? Or has it deterred you from ever sending an invite to someone for fear you might look like a spammer? Then this next article is for you. It's called, Here's How to Send a LinkedIn Connection Request to Someone You Haven't Met Before Without Sounding Like Spam. And it has some easy tips using their own algorithms to help you reach out in a way that makes people want to engage instead of wanting to block you. The next on the list is that article I mentioned, which was the last release of the year and has had a lot of traction already. You'll likely not be too surprised when you hear the title. It's called These 5 Simple Concepts of Behavioral Economics Can Drastically Improve Your Marketing Efforts. This article was very much intended to be a summary of the top recommendations I give to my clients on how to include behavioral economics and how to use them in any business. It includes framing, anchoring, and many of the topics I've mentioned in this episode. It's definitely worth a read. Next is called These Small Tweaks to Your Daily Routine Will Eliminate Unnecessary Mistakes. And I was inspired to write it while I was traveling in London working with a client. As you likely know from listening to the podcast, our lives and decisions are dominated by the subconscious brain, which makes 99% of decisions for us using rules of thumb and what has worked in the past. The subconscious can process 11 million bits of information per second, and the conscious can only handle a measly 40 bits per second. So what hits the conscious needs to be really important, or you're just wasting time and making unnecessary mistakes. When the things we take for granted, like which way to look before crossing a street, need to be elevated to the conscious brain for processing, as they were when I was traveling in London, that means something else needs to be knocked down to the subconscious for less focused attention. If you're constantly overwhelmed, you're likely making unnecessary mistakes. Getting organized and having some routines that work, moving more stuff into good, solid rules means more room for your conscious to focus on important stuff. I'm going to be talking about this in more detail on next week's episode. And this article also has tips on using this information to your advantage so you can train your brain to be better with change by being intentional. Really, really a fun article. I enjoyed writing that one. All right, into the top 5. This next one is a good combination of concepts called the font size on your price tags could be reducing your sales by 28%. Here's how to fix it. This one is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll let you know that the tips apply beyond physical price tags and are important for showcasing prices in any format, whether they're on a website or in a brochure. The way you show prices, in this case, it's specifically when there's a sale going on, it matters. And font size is a big part of that, with the way that the brain associates the physical size with an effort or an amount being big or small. The next article, Effortlessly Increase Creative Ideas with These 4 Simple Brain Hacks, is about priming and associations in the brain. Warm drinks, colorful Post-it notes, and other small things have been shown to have a positive impact on the number of creative ideas teams come up with. If you're putting on any team events, brainstorming sessions, or things like that in 2020, read this article. And if you're interested in a facilitator who could help take you through the much better approach of question storming, send me an email, melina@thebrainybusiness.com, and we can talk about that more. The third most read article is another new post from late December called Why You Should Ditch Your Flimsy Paper Business Cards Right Now. This also gets into priming and brain associations and is essentially outlining how the senses impact the way people think about your brand. Things that seem like unimportant details could actually be derailing your other efforts, and things like business cards or other paper stock aren't the best place to save a few bucks. As I say in this article and to my clients all the time, just because you don't think about it in advance doesn't mean the customer's brain isn't thinking about it. So these little details can be easy to change and make all the difference in interactions with customers, including getting more of them. In the article, I briefly share a little story where I was meeting with someone in person at a conference last year, and she handed me one of her cards. She works in marketing. It was very, very soft, velvety card. You could tell that she invested money in the business. And so going beyond that, after I commented on the card, she said thanks and let me know that she has people compliment her on it all the time. And she's a friend of mine, somebody that I know fairly well. And so I asked her, as I often ask people questions, as probably doesn't surprise you too much, but I asked her what she says when people compliment her on her cards. And she said that her common response is just thank you, and or possibly saying that she designed them herself, which is good for a marketing company. But to be able to take that a step further, I told her a different way that she could respond that's working in a favorable way with what the brain is already thinking. So instead of saying thanks, I designed them myself, or just thank you very much, I encouraged her to say thanks. This is representative of the how smooth and easy I can make your marketing. Something along those lines that's then making the association in the brain of the soft touch tie back to the smooth experience you would have in working with her. And then the brain is going to relate to that more in that memory center of the brain based on the science of, touching things, how that all comes together, and be just overall impactful for her business. So I love working with businesses on finding and implementing things like this throughout a company, far beyond business cards. And so if you would like to work on this in 2020, let's talk. Melina@thebrainybusiness.com. All right. The second most read article on Inc. is the first one I wrote for them. It's called One Simple Brain Trick That Can Help You Overcome Self-Doubt Forever. This is very much in the mindset genre and something I will work on with you in the mindset course. It's about understanding that the frequency at which you say things to yourself matters, and changing behavior can take time, which is why you need to limit your focus. Let's say you want to be better at public speaking, and you've told yourself you're a terrible public speaker since you fainted on stage when you were 9 years old, or maybe something less dramatic than that. But in this situation, you've probably said negative stuff to yourself so much, it's an automatic response now. When you think or hear public speaking, or are given the opportunity, your brain has an immediate, visceral reaction to the idea. You may feel sick to your stomach and think, no way, before you could consciously process what's being talked about there. This type of reaction is so ingrained in you and who you are, it takes time to change, which is why limited focus on top priorities is so important. This article gave some more detail on understanding how this works in the brain and how to work on your own at shifting your behavior and first reactions when you're ready to change and not have this sort of visceral reaction to a concept anymore. And I know I've mentioned it a few times throughout the episode, but if you heard this bit and know you need help in this area and something you want to be better at in 2020, but have a giant block around, whether it's public speaking or raising prices or starting that podcast or pitching your ideas to your boss or to the media or starting a business or asking for a promotion, whatever it is, the Brainy Mindset course is a fantastic resource for you, and I'll be working with you live over 6 weeks. The next one is starting this month and gives you all the steps you need to push past mindset blocks now and into the future. You know if you had that feeling in your gut. If this is for you, you know I'm talking to you right now, and it's time to overcome time discounting, and I want to make it even easier for you to sign up now. Because you're a podcast listener, you can use the code BRAINY50OFF, BRAINY50OFF, to take $50 off your registration and join us to tackle mindset. Again, all the details are at thebrainybusiness.com/courses, and the code is BRAINY50OFF, which is in the show notes for you as well. All right, let's close this episode on the top content of 2019 with the most read article I wrote for Inc., which is called "A Starbucks Barista Asked Me This One Simple Question, and Using It May Be a Great Way to Boost Your Sales." This article is about framing and breaking free of the way we've always done things. Think of the questions you're asked all the time, every day, and the things you ask other people. Is it actually encouraging them to think and respond thoughtfully, or is it just a go with the motions question? When ordering from any drive-thru, Starbucks or elsewhere, you get asked the "anything else?" question and can instinctively respond no without much conscious thought. It doesn't open up the conversation at all or encourage people, customers, to get more from you if you're working at the store. But remember from that episode on the pain of paying that I talked about earlier today, getting people to make the choice to overcome the hurdle and buy something from you is much more difficult than then getting them to buy more things from you once they're in the purchasing mindset. So it's easier to get people to add things on than to get them to buy in the first place. Asking a slightly different question can move the interaction in a much different direction, and one that's very positive for a business. In this case, after I ordered my drink, the barista asked, "And what else sounds delicious today?" which is a different question entirely and opens up the conversation and gets my brain thinking about what other delicious treats that I might want to have. I give some examples of how to use this in your business and why it works in that article, which again, like everything else I talked about today, is linked for you in the show notes at thebrainybusiness.com/82. There's so much to learn and implement. I hope this episode opened your eyes to some exciting content from the Brainy business that you may have missed or want to revisit. As I said at the top of the show, there are a lot of episodes and articles linked in the show notes this week. If there was ever a time to check out those show notes for easy reference to past content, this is the time. Whether you want to be reminded where to pick up listening, the notes are broken down by point, down to the second where I start talking about a concept. Or if you want an easy link to read or listen to content, or sign up for a course and get that discount code, it's all easy for you in the show notes, both within the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/82. Thank you again for making 2019 such an amazing year, and for listening, subscribing, sharing, rating, and reviewing the Brainy Business Podcast. I appreciate you all and can't wait to see what 2020 has in store. And just like that, episode 82 on the best of the Brainy business in 2019 is done. Next week, as I alluded to in the episode, I'm going to expand on a few of the items that came up in the top content shared today and keep with that behavioral change theme by talking about the benefits of decluttering and organizing your brain. This is a favorite from the Brainy Mindset course, and I know it will be really valuable for everyone listening. This episode will have everything from generalizable theories to specifics like Gantt charts and Trello boards. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.